The first question that we'll start off with, and you guys can, whichever one of you wants to answer it first, you guys can just speak up. It's totally fine, either or. So when you look at the last couple years of the pandemic, and again, how much everything has changed, whether it be technology on a day-to-day basis or social emotional learning, anything that really comes to your mind, how do you feel like the pandemic has changed you as an educator?
So we both feel, Tiffany and I have talked about this, we both feel it's changed us in lots of different ways. And so one of those ways, relationships have always been super important to both of our classrooms. But since the pandemic and not being face to face with kids all the time, you really realize how important those interactions are, whether it be in small groups, whole groups, just kind of getting to know kids outside of just school and their likes and what makes them them. And so just continuing to build those relationships with kids has been super important.
And that was something that was really hard at first when we were doing virtual. That was the first thing that I was really upset about, is I thought, oh, this is going to be so hard to build relationships with kids virtually. But it actually happened, and it was kind of cool that we were still able to do that. And I feel like a really strong connection with those kids that we went through that time together, just because it was like we were all learning something new at the same time, and it makes me emotional thinking about it.
And it was, and we always think about like, oh my goodness, COVID learning was like this horrible thing, and it was so cool to see insight into their lives through their homes. And so like some of my favorite things were like this time of year with Elf on the Shelf. The kids were like, let me show you this, and here he is today, and so we got to learn even more about kids. And so I feel like that really was like, okay, we need to do this when we come back to in-person learning again, is we really need to just take that time and like just, even though we can't be in their homes with them like we were before, to just really get to know them other than inside of our classrooms and
have those conversations with them, because like Elf on the Shelf right now, that's really big for them. And so letting them have the time to talk about that, and that kind of goes with the SEL too, is the building relationships, but also there's just more kids that are struggling right now, it seems like. And so just trying to really spend time getting to know them and what makes them happy, and trying to find that and to help them be successful for their whole day.
And we've always had an SEL curriculum, and it was kind of like something we would spend like a day out of the week working on. Well, now it's every day. And we're pulling in more books. And I feel like, too, as teachers, we're like in the moment for SEL. If a problem is happening, we stop what we're doing and we address that problem. So I feel like that's really strengthened our SEL. Like Tiffany said, just knowing kind of what makes them happy, kind of having those coping mechanisms if something is happening with a peer, or we just kind of stop what we're teaching, and that's number one right now.
Yeah, I remember having so many conversations with people at the onset of the pandemic, when so much changes, right? And you guys, especially as elementary teachers, are like, relationships are the most important thing here. Let's not forget it. And I think the big, one of those fears was that when we're back in the classroom, and once we do that for a while, we're going to start to take it for granted again, and we're going to start to recede back to the way things were before. Is that something that you guys were conscious of as you were coming back to the classroom, of we really can't just let ourselves slip back to the way things were before?
I think we were, and what we've kind of done too through curriculum-wise is we've really now figured out our essentials. What does a third grader need to know before they go to fourth grade? Really kind of like having that, that more of a targeted look at what they need to do, so that way we're able to build those relationships, focus on SEL, also academics, but kind of just having that focus more now on the absolute essentials.
Yeah, our pacing has definitely changed a little bit, and I'm not necessarily curriculum-wise in the same place that I maybe was a couple years ago at the same time, but you have to just pick out what's most important, and because we have so much that we have to focus on, so trying to just find the most important things, but also building other things into our day, the SEL component too.
Yeah, I think that social SEL and social emotional learning, I know education is a land of a million acronyms, so people that might not be familiar with that. So I'm curious, people, I think when they hear building relationships is important, I think that's something that people get. It makes sense to them intuitively. But for people that aren't familiar with what that looks like on a day-to-day basis and what implementing social emotional learning looks like, can you give us a little bit of insight onto, what that really means for you as a teacher on an everyday basis?
So every examples that just kind of that we do, I feel like there's so many things we do just naturally now. But we start our morning every day with a morning meeting, and in that morning meeting we share an awesome part of our day from the day before. And so that's just building in that relationship piece. Kind of maybe there was something that they heard to another friend say, and then that made them happy. Like a lot of our awesomes are like, so and so did a great job partner reading with me today, or said hi to me on the playground, things like that. And then I also feel like bringing in books now. So like we had the other day, just kind of like someone was really down on themselves because of just something going on in class, and so it's immediately let's pull out a picture book and we can relate to that character instead of talking just about that student. We're looking at it as a whole and being able to address those concerns. So I think pulling in a lot of books and then just conversations.
And I agree with what Whitney said. Pulling in books is really important because sometimes just having those conversations when you're in the moment, the kids aren't ready for that. But if you pull in the book, then it's somebody else having the problem in the book. But then saying, okay, has anybody ever felt this way? And then again, having conversations about, having kids share what their feelings have been, using the book as the launching pad. But then also just sometimes with kids, I have some kids that shut down a lot. And so just trying to find out like, why aren't they talking to me right now? What can I do to get them to do what they need to be doing in this moment? And so sometimes like a couple of my kids this year just won't open up and say what's wrong with them. And so I've learned just to give them like a piece of paper or a dry erase board and say, okay, draw a picture of what you're feeling right now. And sometimes that helps. So, and I just get those tips from our social worker or from our special education teacher to help me know how can I help them.
Does you feel like the school is a bit more collaborative when it comes to working with, social workers, counselors, special education teachers? Is it more, you guys are open to communicating more throughout the day?
Yeah, and I even feel like teammate-wise too, like and even across grade levels, like through COVID, you could not be on your own. And so I feel like just everybody now, we all work as a team across the building, across the district. Because you learned so much in COVID that you had to collaborate. Like we all had to be in this together to make it successful for the kids. And so kids are number one priority, and they always have been. But I feel like through COVID, that's been a huge game changer. Is we're all in it for the kids. They're all of our kids.
The last question I'll end off on is just obviously the last couple of years have been so challenging. And education, I feel like in general, just like the national conversation has become a more like heated issue. And so I'm curious for you both, what's just something about being an educator that you just wish more people knew? Something you think is more important than people might realize who aren't in these classrooms, aren't with these kids every day?
For me, I think it would be how much time goes into being ready for your day. But then also you spend time being ready, but you still don't really know what's going to happen, what the kids how they're going to respond to something, or what kind of mood they're going to come in that day. And so I don't know if people realize that we're just like always on. Like when you step your foot into the building, you have a smile on your face, no matter what happened at home that morning. And it's like, you have to let your worries and your troubles kind of go away, and I'm here for the kids. And so I don't know if people really realize that everything that we do is not just, I'm going to teach this lesson, but, how am I going to get everybody on the same page?
I would piggyback off of that exactly, to where when we leave the building, we don't leave our work behind. You're constantly up thinking about the kids, or like, oh, this lesson went well today, but these friends are still not getting it. What can I do? And so I know I sleep with like a notebook next to my bed, just so I know, like, so I can remember, like in the middle of the night if I wake up and I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot to do this, or so and so needs this tomorrow. So I just feel like our brains are never off, and they're our kids, even whether we have them this year or we had them 10 years ago. And so I just feel like we're always, yeah, like Tiffany said, we're always on.